Hello, my friends, and welcome to Brand Your Dream Show. Today we're talking about money with David Chudyk, and he is financial planner. Hi, David. How are you doing?
I am doing really, really well, and I'm really excited to be talking about some money and money mindset topics today.
Fantastic. So tell us a little bit more about your story. How did you become financial planner?
Yeah, so I think most of our and things that we're fascinated about, they begin in childhood and certainly our attitudes about money begin in childhood. So growing up, my family, there really wasn't much money. I wouldn't say that we were almost homeless, but we certainly didn't have excess. I always looked at kind of the other thought, how come those people have nicer cars and maybe don't complain about money and things like that. So it was always something that I was interested in. And then as I got to where I was a teenager, late teenager, and in college, I started looking at ways that I could just make more money myself, just because of what money does, as far as helping you have a little bit less stress and a little bit more margin. So I did things like work more. I figured out ways to work overtime. I figured out ways to kind of work commission based jobs, things like that. And I also, as I was driving 30 minutes to college every day, I would listen to some money talk shows. There was a talk show called Money Talk, and it talked about which stocks to buy and sell. And I just got really fascinated with the fact that you could have money make money for you, and in addition to having yourself make money for you. So I went to college, did a couple different things, and then in my early 20s, I kind of got an entry level financial services position in a small office, and I really fell in love with it because I had the ability to start coaching people to have better lives based on how they handle their money. A couple of years later, I had a chance to buy my own practice, and shoot, 15, 16 years later, here I am, podcasting and helping people locally, and really just kind of getting the word out that how we handle our money should really positively impact our lives and the lives of those around us.
Absolutely. And let's start with our first question. And I always wrap this question around the guest expertise. And as we always speak about visibility at the beginning, I already discussed this question with the previous guest, Andrew Hoffman, when we were talking about the desire to have a life which most likely we either don't need or society forces to have some extra expensive cars, extra expensive houses. So visibility is often become visible but not necessary. Speaking about this, I think it's important question to discuss in terms of money. So I mean, I'm not sure if we have to discuss if people really, really need it, because we know they don't. So, that desire to run after the shiny object and spend all the money on it, can you provide some healthy idea how people can show up and make money and save money and feel comfortable with a family, with their life?
Well, and I've heard it said before, there's nothing wrong with having nice stuff as long as the nice stuff doesn't have you. So it's kind of deep, but if your financial reality allows you to be able to afford something that's nicer, something that's a want, not a need, something nicer than what my financial reality allows me to afford, I think that's okay. But I also think that we all need to look inside of our hearts and kind of see, like, why do we want the things that we want? If I'm already doing all the things that I need to do financially, I'm being generous, I'm saving, I'm treating people well. And if there's a car or an item or a trip that's maybe extravagant, but I can afford it, I don't think there's anything wrong with that if it's financially reasonable. Now, if I'm someone who constantly needs to have the shiny objects, for prideful reasons, so I can think that deep down I'm a better person than you because I have nicer stuff and you're not worthwhile because you don't have good stuff like I do, then that's a heart issue. And I think that we all need to look at our hearts and kind of figure out where we are and why we are there. But from the dollars and cents standpoint, if you're doing all the right things and you have some wants that are not needs, they're wants, and they're within your financial reality, and if you have a pure heart, I say go for it. But this is why it's important to have people in your life that can kind of help keep you in check. So your financial advisor, but then your friends, your family to keep us in check and decide, why do we want what we want. My family and I, we moved from one house to another a couple of years ago. It was actually right during the middle of COVID, and I don't know. We bought a house that's probably half the amount of money that we could comfortably afford. So it's a nice house, but we could have probably spent more than double the amount of money. But then what happens? Um, if money ever gets tight, your monthly obligations are much higher. Being in business for yourself, revenue is never guaranteed. So, there's ebbs and flows of revenue. So we decided that for our family, the best financial decision is buy a nice house. And we have a nice house, but not certainly the most expensive house that we could possibly afford. So now we have some financial margin. And if things happen, unforeseen issues happen, sicknesses, anything can happen. COVID could happen again and shut down an economy. We have a lot more margin, and that gives us less stress. And when there's less stress, we're just better at every role that we play. I'm a better husband, better father, better everything when there's less stress. Because when you come home and you're stressed out about money, you kick the dog. You maybe not as patient as you should be with your kids. You may not be present with other family members, and that just doesn't lead to a good life.
Yes, I love this. And let's speak a little bit more about the assets and expenses because, considering this visibility situation, when we speak about the shiny objects, they're
Mhm.
rarely the assets. And I think for many people, when I speak with them about the business and branding and things like that, I often turn my consultancy from speaking about branding towards business because until people learn how to earn money in their business, they don't need to speak about videos, they don't need to speak about branding, they need to look on money, how many assets they generate for the business. And the shiny object in case of business is often the visibility aspects, like spending on some social media or branding or sites or something like this. At the beginning of the business, especially for startups, they can go with a very basic ideas on social media and pretty much run the social media by themselves, instead focusing on how to bring more assets towards business, towards their family, and this way, as you said, create the foundation where eventually if something happens they will be more protected. So let's speak about this. What is your best advice on this asset shiny object balance, probably?
Sure. So from a personal, let's separate your personal finances from your business finances. So from a personal finance standpoint, we have to live by a formula of income minus expenses has to equal greater than zero. So if you're bringing in $100 a week, you have to spend less than $100. Now, we can certainly debate on how much less than $100. There are different rules of thumb that you should live off of 80% of your money or 90% or 75%. And we can talk about all of that. But the bottom line is we all get ourselves in trouble when we're spending every dollar that comes in. And if that were not true, it would only be lower income people that end up bankrupt. But that's not what happens. You look at many athletes. You could say, well, I would never, ever go bankrupt if I made $20 million a year. Well, I don't know. Lots of athletes, they go bankrupt because your $20 million turns into $10 million after taxes. And then you take 10-15% for your agent and then a few bad mistakes and then all of a sudden all the money's gone. So the only difference between high earning people and low earning people that go bankrupt is the high earning people have a heck of a lot more fun on the way down because it is more fun to go bankrupt when you've had three Lamborghinis, but it's still a math question. So if you make $20 million a year, you cannot spend 20 million. And you might be able to sustain it for a little while, but you can't do it indefinitely. If you make $10,000 a year, you can't spend $10,000 a year. You have to find ways to either increase your income or decrease your expenses. But now there are a lot of financial gurus that talk a lot about cutting expenses. And yes, our expenses need to be in line with our financial reality. So you may be able to afford more or less items than I can because we're different people. But most financial gurus that are kind of our authors and on the internet and everything, they don't talk about the other side of the equation. If we do what's necessary to increase our income, well, then that allows us to spend a little bit more money so you don't have to watch every penny. So, as a business owner, you certainly have a lot of control over your income. There are things you can do to increase your income and your revenue. But even if you're not a business owner, and if you're an employee, there are a lot of things that you can tend to do to increase your income. You can do just a better job at your job, and then you have bargaining power, and you can ask your boss for a raise and say, "Hey, since I've been working here, I've done this, and this, and that's increased revenue, blah, blah, blah. So I would, respectfully ask that, you take my salary from here to here." And if they don't, then you can go to the same business, same type business down the block and say, "Hey, while I was working for this other company, their revenue jumped up 50% because I did this and this and this. And if you pay me, you, and I can do the same thing for you." And I know that's very simplistic, but the more valuable we are, the more we'll end up earning in the long term. Now, it doesn't necessarily translate on a daily basis, but over time, if you're harder to replace, you make more money. That's just the way life is.
There is a very interesting question from which we will transition towards the authenticity. And that's a question on value. Because
Mm-hmm.
especially for entrepreneurs, like our show is mostly catered to entrepreneurs and business owners, coaches and course creators, these people deliver a lot of value. They either do YouTube shows, they either create some courses. I speak crazy amount of time with people who want to help underprivileged communities, one of a kind, like single moms, entrepreneurs who are not yet making much money, minorities of any kind, and they eager to create very low priced courses or low priced products to make maximum impact for these people who are underprivileged and can't pay. Now, unfortunately, this doesn't work as a business model because basically these people can't pay. And I always recommend the system, which is very different. Basically, you need to go through charity or you need to find the funding and then deliver your content for free so that somebody else who have money pay for your products or courses,
Sure.
and
Mm-hmm.
then you actually can cater to the category who you want to help. So it's, by the way, it doesn't work for many people mentally because they are more ready to work like 24/7 and spend all their money to help this underprivileged community instead of actually open a few doors and say, well, I need your money to help people who I want to help, because they feel that they are not that valuable. That's an interesting twist because they create values, they want to create values, they're ready to give it for free, but they feel so undervalued that they're not ready to open these doors for charities or government organizations, which is a very interesting question. So, how do you think people can see themselves as valuable? Because again, these people many times they don't have super great cars, they don't have
Right.
$1 million house, and unfortunately on social media we were told that you are only valuable when you have all these brilliant assets and otherwise you are
Mm-hmm.
nothing. I was
Right.
criticized for the fact that I don't speak about my properties, I don't speak about my finances, and in fact was called a loser because I don't have $1 million house, which was very interesting. I'm like, you have no idea what I have, where I have. I never spoke about that. So it's very strange for me to be criticized for things which were never mentioned anywhere. So, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to discuss that. So, thing is, you know, how these people can see their value while they don't have this much money, and how they can improve the situation. So it's a double twist question about authenticity. You see, so they have to act not authentically because they don't have this financial assets. And on the other hand, people who have that financial assets many times really not authentic and not even trying to help anybody. So this is a double question for you.
Yeah, yeah, and that's a tough one, but I think we all need to look at what actually is value as far as what makes a person valuable. And in most cases, it's not necessarily money. Now, of course, money is a component. If I needed financial help from you, and if you did not have any means to help me financially, obviously you could not help me. But what are the qualities that you look to your friends and family that make them valuable? It would be caring. It would be maybe belief, certain beliefs. It would be nurturing and things like that. So I think I think it's actually even more prevalent for men, because I think men, we equate a lot of our self-worth with money, and that's, maybe ingrained in us. Maybe it's partially good, partially bad, I don't know. But a man would certainly, when a man is going through a period of financial hardship, I think it does maybe dig deeper into their soul and hurt more than a woman, maybe, I don't know. But yes, it's very easy to equate self-worth with how much money you have. But I think we need to be strong, and we need to look at our core beliefs and our core values, and most of them are not actually financially related. Now, for those people in the world that become financially successful because by doing it the right way, I've heard Jim Rohn says, it's not the $1 million, it's who you had to become in order to have the $1 million. So by working hard and doing things that you don't want to do and being disciplined and delivering value, you got the money. But it's not the money that's important, it's what you had to become in order to get the money, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. So speaking about the man and money, and I like you raise this theme because I was looking at it in a very different direction, like for a few years, especially when pandemic started. I saw many men were in a situation where they couldn't provide for their families because probably they lost their income or something like that, and there was a lot of depression and pressure on them
Mhm.
because they have to care about their family or families, and they have to care about everything. For some men who I know, they have many women in a family, like, mothers, grandmothers, daughters, and wives or ex-wives, and all the things. And basically, they are only provider or one of the few providers for the huge amount of women around. And that put them under tremendous pressure, and like I saw that it was really really difficult for them to handle. So what is your best advice for men? Because what I saw they do, they actually, for example, they're in some depth or something like that, and they need to provide for the family. And what they do is they pretty much start working 24/7. And we
Mhm.
understand that it lead to burnout, one way or another. So what is your best advice for men or women to get themselves out of the depth?
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I think we need to do soul searching, first of all. And I think we need to see, what do the people around us that rely on us, what do they truly need from us? And yes, part of it is money. I mean, oftentimes in most societies, a man is a breadwinner. So oftentimes our families, they do need us to provide financially. But what else do they need from us? They need for us to be present. They need for to perform fatherly duties. So we need to understand that while providing financially typically is part of our responsibility, it's not all of it. Then the other thing that we need to do is we need to understand that if you're not living up to your non-financial obligations, then you can provide all the money in the world and you're still a jerk. Or you could be a jerk. So I've been around enough very wealthy people to know that money or the earning of significant amounts of money does not solve all the problems of the world. And many people can have a lot of relationship problems, even health problems. I mean, if you're working too much and you're neglecting your body, and that certainly doesn't help the cause. So simply earning a lot of money does not solve all of the problems. It doesn't make you a good person. We have to be well balanced, and you have to look at the other areas of life. You have to look at your physical health, your spiritual health, your relational health, all the balance areas, because some of the more unhappy people that I've ever known have been very, very wealthy high earners. So you have to have the balance, and you have to have the mental toughness to acknowledge. So one of the things that I do every day, based on my business coach, is I consciously write down 3 of my wins from yesterday. So 3 things that went well. And some days it was, yeah, I got a new client that's going to bring in significant revenue. Some days it's, I got my entire to-do list done. Some days it's, I went on a walk with my wife and that didn't cost any money. It wasn't an expensive vacation. So by acknowledging wins, and not all of them are financial, not all of them have to cost a lot of money, you can start to break away from that belief that the only value that you can bring to your family and to those around you is a lot of money. One of the things that I did with my children when they were young is every day we played the thankful game before we went to bed, and we just told what we were thankful for. And of course, kids, they were thankful that we had ice cream or there was a cartoon on TV or anything like that. But isn't that a great way to live life, to look for things to be thankful for? Because I don't care who you are going to have times where you are going to not be strong financially, whether it's your own fault or just the fault of the economy or COVID or anything else. I mean, not everybody is doing financially well all the time. And if you're looking at the other areas in your life where you truly, truly are benefiting the people around you, then I think that can help you to keep that feeling of self-worth up. But I do think it is a struggle for a lot of men, specifically.
Hmm. I absolutely agree with you. It's interesting how less we put the pressure on women. They have that pressure just ultimately because they're also breadwinners and they have to earn money as well. It just society doesn't pressurize them that way as it
Hmm.
pressurizes men. So it's
Hmm.
like an ultimate idea for men to be a breadwinner, and that just an extra like a straw, which can break the bones and stuff like this, or spine. I forgot the saying. So I hope as society we will be able to change it one day, because I think men deserve as much love as women. So
Sure.
absolutely. So, speaking about the way how to get out from the financial jeopardy. So, you said, and I really love that you say that it's not always the fault of the person that they are in debt or they are in difficult financial situation. It's many times circumstances, some financial crises. So I personally been through 3 or 4 financial crises which happen either country-wise as a worldwide, and yes, they did affect businesses, especially business owners.
Sure.
And I know it sometimes just not depend on you. So what is your best recommendation or to get quickly from the bad financial situation? Because sometimes, especially for women over 40, and I know it for sure, it's very difficult to find the job because, like, obviously the obvious answer, go find the job. So but it's just difficult for many women because they are elder, or for many men who are elder than 50 or 60, again the same situation. If you always worked on the leading position, for example, and for some reasons you lost your position, starting from scratch, well, it feels like humiliation. So what is the best way, if any, to get out from the difficult financial situation?
So, a few things. Number one is we always have to acknowledge reality. And sometimes reality is not what we want, right? So you may have some bills coming due and not have the money to pay them. Well, first thing to do is say, hey, we have $1,000 worth of bills coming up and we only have $500. That stinks. That's no fun. We don't like that, but it is reality. And once you acknowledge that reality, you can start to begin to come up with solutions. And then I think is regardless of if how you got there is your fault or circumstance or some of each, and it's probably most often some of each. I mean, there could be a time. Let me give you an example. When COVID hit in the United States, revenue shut down for a lot of people. Some people had a little bit of an emergency fund, so while there was no money coming in, they had a little bit of money to live off of. Some people had no emergency fund. So the people had no emergency fund, you could probably make the argument that life would have been better if they would have had a few dollars put away for an emergency, but they didn't, and that probably they have some responsibility for. But once we're in a situation, I think we now have to say, well, the past may or may not have been my fault, or may have been partially my fault, or however we want to word it. But the future is up to me. So I and the people around me, we need to figure out what we're going to do to change our circumstances and take responsibility and make it happen. There's sometimes getting a job is not the answer. Sometimes you have to make the job. Sometimes you have to figure out a way to be your own boss. Sometimes you have to acquire new skills. Sometimes you have to get a second job. There are times in life where maybe you just have to work a lot more than you want to temporarily, just because that's what the situation requires. So I think that the blame game, I think in our society, sometimes it's easier to blame the other party, the other people, the people who have different opinions. It's always the other people's fault. And whether it is all their fault or part their fault or none of their fault, I think the solution oftentimes just is inside of me, and your future is inside of you. And looking for those solutions is what we need to do, and that's hard sometimes. And depending on the circumstance, it can be very hard. But I think that's just kind of part of being a grown up, unfortunately.
I really like this idea. Like you need to acknowledge the reality. And when you were
Mhm.
saying this, I was like, sitting and like, oh, do people not acknowledging the reality? And then on the other hand, it's a good to have the reality check about
Mhm.
anything, about the business, about finances, about relationships, just to be aware what is going on and realize that, well, everything is just a mirror, it's just reflecting what is inside, as you said.
Mhm.
So it's a very interesting aspect of that. So I love that you
So
give
what
them
happens when you go to your doctor? When you go to your doctor for your annual checkup, what do? They acknowledge your reality. They take blood work
exactly.
and they say, your cholesterol's good or it's bad, or and then they take your blood pressure, and then they'll put you on a scale, and they'll do just some baseline level tests because they have to figure out where you are. And then if there's sometimes there are physical problems within people, you don't even know that they exist, but then a blood test reveals it, and now it's like, okay, we know you have a physical issue. Now let's
Mhm.
figure out a solution. And we need to do the same thing in all areas of our life. We need to know where we are, and it's hard. I mean, it's hard for me too. It's hard for everybody to, because we all know deep down the parts of our lives where we are not where, and that's just a reality, because we're not striving and succeeding in every possible area. It's just impossible.
It was really interesting. There was some survey that people put their car to check more often than they actually check themselves. So
Mhm.
it's exactly the same thing. How often you check your car for oil, for everything, or put petrol in it. So it's pretty much the same. Acknowledging your reality is the same thing like checking your car, as you say, going to the doctor office. So let me ask you the question, which is like always the key question of this podcast. Uh, what are your best three advice for our viewers?
Wow. Okay. So let's go back to the one we just talked about. Let's acknowledge our realities. Okay. In today's world, the stock markets, I think emotions take over a lot of decisions, and I've heard so many people recently saying, I'm losing all of my money in the stock market. And that's simply not the case. If, and especially if you've been investing for a long time, you've, over the last year, you may have lost a little bit of money, but you've lost some of the growth. And only to acknowledge our realities. That's just the bottom line. And quite often, emotions create a reality that we think is true, and it just simply isn't. And again, I'll have people, they'll say, well, I lost half my money this year. Then you look at their statement, it's like, no, you lost like 6%. And it stinks. I don't want you to lose 6%, but 6% and half are not the same thing. So,
Mm.
number two, I would say, is to take ownership of your life, and take ownership of the areas of your life that you want to improve. Ultimately, it's up to me to improve my areas. It's up to you to improve yours. We live in a world where there's so many resources. I mean, there are podcasts about every possible topic. You could YouTube anything, free information. So take some responsibility and take ownership of your life. And again, this is hard because I, as a human being, I would love to blame you for my shortcomings, right? I mean, it can't possibly be that I'm lazy or just not disciplined or didn't do the right things. It has to be your fault or somebody else's fault, but oftentimes that's not the case. And number three is live a good life. Don't get so caught up in all of the negatives. You can watch TV and there's always the other political party is out to get us, and whoever I didn't vote for is out to get me. And yes, the world absolutely has problems. There's no question about that. And there are maybe some external problems that we may be called to go help fix, but the world is still a pretty good place. So look for all of the positives in life. Sometimes there is, there's just, you look at a sunset and you had a horrible day. It was a stressful day, but you're driving home and there's a beautiful sunset. Remember the sunset, remember all the positives in life, because there are lots and lots of positives in life. And there is always, always someone who would trade places with you or with me or with most of us. So I think to consciously look for positives in life just can give such a different perspective on life.
Absolutely. I love these recommendations because they're not necessarily about the money, but a lot about the mindset and the
Mm-hmm.
way how we can attract things in our life
Sure.
which are more positive and more positive
Sure.
situations, and completely agree with you. So how people can connect with you?
A couple things, and can I throw in a fourth, because you threw the three on me, but the fourth would be, after you do the first three, work with experts in the areas where you're not an expert. So if you're a money expert, great, handle your own money. But if you're not, hire a money expert. If you need help with your health, hire a health expert. If you're not an expert on doing your own taxes, hire a tax expert. There's an expert everywhere. So we don't have to know everything. There's somebody out there that can help us. And we should do that. So that's number four. I add an extra one in there for you. But so I host the Weekly Wealth Podcast. So I would love for everybody to check out the Weekly Wealth Podcast. We're on Apple, Spotify, we're on all the platforms, or you can go to my website, www.weeklywealthpodcast.com. Our tagline is, we talk about the mindsets, the tactics, and the strategies that can help you to build and maintain wealth. But I don't necessarily define wealth as just accumulating as much money as humanly possible, because you can have a whole lot of money but not have a wealthy life. If you have any money questions, anything you want to discuss, you can always email me at david@parallelfinancial.com. I'm always happy to do a 30-minute Zoom call and just talk about your situation, see if you have any next steps, and kind of point you in the right direction. And I also do something a little bit different as a financial advisor. I do all of the traditional activities that a financial advisor does through the financial planning process, but I also help businesses to increase their value. So I'm a certified, and most business owners have, their biggest asset is their business, but they're not doing the things that they can do to help themselves to be able to sell their business for more when they're ready. So if you check out my other website, www.allofmyassets.com, you can learn a little bit about some of the things that you can do to help make your business more sellable when the time comes, or you can just have a more profitable business today because a sellable business is a profitable business. So there you go.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for all these recommendations, and I hope it will inspire many people to take the leap and move forward better financial situation, because it's not really about finances many time. As you said, it's a lot about your mindset. It's a lot about
Mhm.
how you're really willing to take responsibility for your life and move forward, and actually responsibility to feel a little bit more happier and then move forward. I
Absolutely.
thank you so
Abs-
much.
Okay, great. I enjoyed talking with you.